I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
The proclamation lasted less than 3 minutes, yet by the time King Charles placed his signature beneath the royal seal, the balance of power inside the monarchy had changed. Sophie stood motionless beside the council table as the words, "Royal Guardian of Britain," were read aloud. William did not applaud, Camilla did not speak, and behind the king's decision was an emergency so serious that every senior royal had been summoned without explanation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Before dawn, instructions ordered the royal family to an emergency council at Buckingham Palace. An emergency council was a meeting called when decisions could affect the crown's stability. Sophie expected a discussion about Charles's schedule, but that belief vanished when she found William, Anne, Edward, and Camilla waiting in silence. Charles entered carrying a red folder and refused his chair. He remained standing and announced that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, would become the new Royal Guardian of Britain. The title meant she would protect royal continuity, coordinate senior duties during national emergencies, and preserve order whenever the sovereign could not act publicly. The king read slowly. No one could misunderstand. Sophie heard her name, yet she could not move. Her fingers pressed against the chair as Edward leaned closer and asked whether she was all right. She looked toward Charles for reassurance. The monarch answered with one grave nod, confirming this was not ceremonial praise. It was responsibility born from danger. Camilla lowered the briefing paper in her hand. The queen consort had expected emergency authority to remain close to her position, and Charles saw the shock cross her face. Still, he continued. William studied the proclamation before turning toward Sophie. The prince did not fear her appointment. He feared why his father believed it necessary. Then the second page changed everything. The role would activate during internal disruption, disputed authority, or an interruption of sovereign command. Royal continuity meant keeping the monarchy functioning when leadership was threatened or divided. Those words revealed that Charles was not preparing for an outside emergency. He was building protection against a crisis inside the household. The king finished, placed the pen beside the proclamation, and left it there. Sophie rose, crossed the room, and accepted the sealed document, while Camilla watched without blinking. Charles delivered a warning. The title had not been created to honor Sophie's past service. It had been created because of what he believed might happen next. Sophie entered as a trusted confidant. She left carrying a title born from fear, and only the king could explain that fear. Sophie had spent years serving without demanding attention, surviving royal upheaval by remaining calm when others became consumed by ambition. Now that restraint had made her indispensable. But Charles had not merely rewarded loyalty. He had placed her between the crown and an unnamed threat. For Sophie, the appointment carried pride, dread, and an unbearable personal question. Had the king chosen her because he trusted her, or because he no longer trusted someone closer? Sophie had built her place inside the monarchy through patience rather than power. She attended difficult engagements, steadied tense family moments, and supported Charles without ever competing for control. That mattered, because loyalty inside the palace was often measured by who wanted influence. The trusted confidant had never appeared hungry for it, and that made the king depend on her even more. Charles had begun calling her into private meetings during the previous months. He asked about royal morale, family tensions, and which disagreements were becoming dangerous. The monarch valued her ability to separate personal feelings from duty, but those conversations moved her into territory once reserved for William, Anne, and the closest royal advisors. A royal advisor was someone trusted to guide the sovereign on family or institutional decisions. Sophie understood the access was an honor. She also knew it could become a burden. Edward saw the danger immediately. Sitting beside his wife in a private room, he asked whether she truly wanted to become the person everyone blamed when the next crisis arrived. He understood the title, but he feared what it might demand from her. Sophie looked at the sealed proclamation and answered that wanting the role no longer mattered if Charles believed the crown needed it. Silence became heavier when Edward left her alone. Sophie opened the document again and stopped at the words, "internal disruption." The phrase meant a breakdown of order caused by conflict inside the royal household itself. Her hand rested on the page as she realized the role might force her to challenge people she loved. She closed the folder, yet her fingers remained pressed against the cover. William approached her near the council chamber. The prince supported her character, but he understood the title touched responsibilities connected to him as heir. Succession meant the legal order deciding who becomes monarch next. He asked whether Charles had explained the limits of her authority. When Sophie admitted he had not, the future king's expression hardened. "My father never creates authority without expecting it to be used," William said. Sophie pressed the proclamation against her chest. She told him Charles had looked more frightened than triumphant. Then she noticed Camilla's chair missing from the adjoining office. An aide quietly explained that the queen consort had refused the next briefing. The title had tested Sophie's courage and William's confidence, but the empty chair revealed where the first fracture had already begun. The proclamation had not begun with a committee, a constitutional debate, or a carefully planned ceremony. It began 3 nights earlier, during a private royal dinner that ended with a folder being pushed across a table and a door closing hard enough to summon guards. That confrontation became the point of no return. By sunrise, Charles had ordered the creation of a new title, and Sophie's quiet life had already been pulled toward the center of the storm. Charles had spent weeks trying to hold 3 competing forces together. His household followed one set of instructions. William's team received another, and Camilla's private advisors kept pressing their own priorities. Appearances were changed without warning. Patronages were disputed. Access to royal residences became a source of quiet resentment. A patronage was an official royal connection to a charity or public organization, and controlling those roles meant controlling influence. Sophie had warned the king days earlier during a private recorded briefing. She told him that personal loyalty was beginning to replace clear authority. The trusted confidant did not accuse Camilla or William directly, but she explained that aides could no longer tell which order carried the sovereign's approval. Charles listened without interruption. He knew confusion inside the palace could become humiliation outside it. Then Sandringham changed everything. Camilla arrived at the private dinner carrying a prepared document. The queen consort placed it before Charles and asked for authority to approve emergency household decisions whenever he was unavailable. Emergency authority meant temporary power to keep royal duties functioning during a crisis. William read the first page and immediately pushed his chair back. The prince told his father that the proposal would bypass the heir and place royal continuity inside a private office. Camilla accused him of treating her like an outsider. He answered that her marriage was not the issue. Secret control was. Charles turned toward his wife and asked why the document had been drafted without his direct instruction. Camilla said she was protecting him from pressure, yet the king heard something darker. To him, the proposal suggested that others were already preparing for a future in which his voice might weaken. The door closed hard after Camilla left. Guards moved toward the room, but Charles dismissed them. Sophie arrived moments later. She found the folder open beside the monarch, while William stood nearby, still fighting his anger. Charles asked her to read the proposal without naming its author. Sophie finished and gave a simple verdict. No spouse, heir, or private office should hold unchecked emergency power. The monarchy needed someone outside the immediate struggle for the throne. Charles looked directly at her. Then he tore the unsigned signature page in half and pressed both pieces beneath his hand. One plan had ended. Another had begun. Before the emergency council met, Camilla learned that Sophie's new title had risen from the ashes of her own proposal. The honor was now a direct answer to a private challenge, and the queen consort was ready to demand that answer face to face. Camilla did not confront Charles first. She went to Sophie, behind closed doors, with no advisors present and no ceremony to soften the encounter. The queen consort demanded to know whether the new guardian had helped engineer her humiliation. Sophie refused to retreat. What followed was not a polite disagreement between royal women. It was a struggle over trust, legitimacy, and who would stand closest to the crown when the king could no longer control every decision himself. Camilla sent the handwritten note only hours after the proclamation. She asked Sophie to come alone to a private drawing room, without Edward, William, or palace officials. The trusted confidant understood the message at once. Refusing would turn tension into open hostility, so she accepted. The royal guardian was a protective role designed to keep the monarchy functioning during internal crisis, and that authority had already made the meeting dangerous. Camilla stood beside the table when Sophie entered. The queen consort said her emergency plan had been practical, not ambitious. She had supported Charles through years of pressure, and she believed that loyalty entitled her to be consulted before a new office was created, especially one capable of examining orders issued through her own household. Then the accusation came. "Did you warn him not to trust his wife?" Sophie held her gaze. She said she had warned the king against trusting any arrangement built without clear and transparent authority. Transparent authority meant that everyone could identify who had approved an order and why. The answer only deepened Camilla's anger, because it confirmed that her proposal had shaped the proclamation. Camilla accused Sophie of accepting the title because she wanted influence without appearing to seek it. The new guardian placed the sealed document on the table and said she would surrender it immediately if that made the crown safer. Then she asked whether the queen consort could say the same about the power she had requested. Camilla's expression changed. She revealed through that private conversation that Charles had once promised she would never be excluded from emergency royal decisions. Sophie finally understood the wound beneath the anger. The king had not merely rejected a proposal, he had reversed a deeply personal assurance without explaining why. Sophie softened her voice, but not her position. She promised the role would never be used to punish Camilla. Yet no royal household would issue commands in the sovereign's name without verification. Verification meant confirming that an instruction truly came from the monarch before anyone acted on it. The queen consort's staff would face the same scrutiny as every other branch of the family. Camilla reached toward the proclamation. Sophie placed her palm firmly over it. Neither woman raised her voice. The queen consort looked at the hand blocking her, then slowly withdrew her own. In that silence, she understood the title already carried real authority. Sophie left and found Charles standing in the corridor. The king had heard enough to understand his wife's resentment, yet he had not entered to comfort her. She told him silence would now cause more damage than the proclamation. Charles answered that he would speak to Camilla, but first, he had to decide how much of the hidden crisis could safely be revealed. The authority behind Sophie's title did not come from affection alone. Charles had built it around a private emergency framework designed to survive illness, family division, and disputed commands. Only 4 people had seen the complete document. When Sophie was finally shown the missing pages, she understood why the king had looked frightened during the proclamation. He was not planning for a distant possibility. He was preparing for a crisis he believed could erupt without warning. Charles led her into his private study and locked the door behind them. The king placed the sealed continuity plan on the desk. A continuity plan was a set of emergency instructions, designed to keep royal duties functioning if the sovereign's orders became delayed, contradicted, or manipulated. Sophie understood at once that this was not ceremonial paperwork. It was protection against paralysis. Charles explained the balance carefully. The sovereign would retain final authority. William would remain the constitutional heir, meaning the person legally next in line to inherit the crown. Sophie would serve only as a stabilizing guardian, verifying disputed instructions, settling conflict between royal households, and preventing one private office from controlling an emergency. The king removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. His voice became quieter. He told Sophie that issuing commands was not the hardest part of kingship. The true burden was knowing whether people obeyed the crown or merely defended their own influence. She saw exhaustion beneath the authority, and for the first time, the proclamation felt less like strength than fear made official. Sophie asked why Anne or William had not been chosen. Charles answered that the Princess Royal was too closely linked to his own command, while the prince had to remain above internal disputes as the future monarch. The trusted confidant had no immediate claim to the throne. That made her less threatening and more useful. Charles then admitted his own failure. He had allowed private promises, overlapping offices, and family loyalties to grow without boundaries. The monarch did not blame Camilla alone. He confessed that avoiding difficult confrontations had created the very confusion Sophie must now control. Then he unlocked a narrow red box. Charles placed 2 orders side by side. One carried approval from William's office. The other bore authorization from Camilla's staff. Both concerned the same national ceremony. Both claimed to express the king's wishes. Sophie studied the matching royal markings. Which one is genuine? That is precisely the danger, Charles replied. The monarch revealed through the sealed documented account that he had approved neither final version. Someone had turned a routine scheduling decision into a test of power. Sophie learned the ceremony was only 48 hours away. Both households were still preparing separate plans. The title had been created to prevent confusion, but her first test demanded something far more dangerous. She would have to stop two royal factions before their private struggle became a public spectacle. Sophie's first act as royal guardian was not symbolic. With the national ceremony approaching, two incompatible royal orders remained active, and neither household was willing to withdraw. One placed Camilla at the center of the event, the other elevated William's leadership. Sophie had only hours to prevent a visible split. Her decision would reveal whether the new title carried genuine power or whether Charles had created an office that the family could simply ignore. Sophie studied both plans and understood the danger immediately. The national service at Westminster Abbey was meant to present unity during a period of pressure. Yet Camilla's office had arranged for the Queen Consort to lead the senior arrival beside Charles. William's team had received instructions placing the prince in the main supporting position because the ceremony focused on future royal continuity. Royal continuity meant keeping the crown stable, as responsibility passed between generations. Confusion had already spread through the household. Staff were using different seating charts, arrival schedules, and speaking orders. One wrong car position could become a public insult. One altered entrance could expose the family's private struggle before millions of viewers. Sophie knew the monarchy would not be judged by the paperwork. It would be judged by the humiliation that followed. Sophie signed her first guardian directive and suspended both plans until the king personally confirmed the arrangement. A guardian directive was a temporary order used to stop disputed royal instructions from being carried out. Camilla saw the decision as a rejection of her place beside Charles. William feared the delay would make the palace appear weak and indecisive. Edward watched his wife set down the pen. Her hand began to tremble. He closed the office door and reminded her that she had just contradicted both the future king and the queen consort. Sophie answered that the title meant nothing if she only used it against people too powerless to resist. Then Camilla refused. Her private secretary informed Sophie that the rehearsal would continue unless Charles personally canceled it. The queen consort was testing whether the guardian's authority could stand alone or only survive when the king defended it. William responded differently. The prince ordered his team to stop all preparations immediately. He told Sophie that he disliked the confusion, but he would not weaken an office his father had created. His decision isolated Camilla and changed the balance of power. Sophie entered the staging room while the procession was still being arranged. She removed Camilla's name card from the leading position, placed it flat on the table, and declared that no rehearsal would continue under an unverified order. Camilla arrived moments later. The queen consort saw the card beneath Sophie's hand, understood what had happened, and turned away without arguing before the staff. That evening, she withdrew from dinner and sent Charles a written message. She would not return to public duty until he decided whether she was still his partner in the monarchy. Sophie had prevented a ceremonial disaster, but while the household began functioning again, the king's marriage started breaking apart in silence. There were no aides, no advisors, and no royal documents between them. For the first time since the proclamation, Charles and Camilla sat alone. The queen consort wanted the title withdrawn. The king refused. Yet beneath their anger was something more painful than a struggle for authority: the realization that their private trust had become entangled with the machinery of the crown. Before the night ended, one of them would have to surrender power, or risk losing the relationship they had fought decades to preserve. Camilla had canceled every evening engagement after Sophie stopped the rehearsal. She remained in her private rooms and refused to meet advisors. The queen consort told her staff that the conflict was no longer administrative. It had become personal. She needed to know whether Charles still saw her as a source of strength, or as a danger that now required supervision. Charles dismissed his own staff and entered alone. The king left the continuity documents outside the room, a deliberate sign that he wanted to speak as a husband rather than as sovereign. A continuity document was an emergency plan designed to keep royal duties functioning during a crisis. Camilla stayed seated when he entered. She did not offer him the comfort of pretending nothing had changed. Camilla spoke first. She told Charles that Sophie's appointment had turned years of loyalty into suspicion. Her proposal might have been imperfect, but she insisted it had been written to protect him. Being overruled before the family had made her feel that the crown had accepted her devotion, used it, and then pushed her aside when trust mattered most. Charles did not defend the manner of his decision. He admitted that he should have confronted the proposal privately before creating the guardian role. The monarch said his deepest fear was not Camilla herself. It was a system in which love could be used to excuse unchecked authority. Unchecked authority meant power exercised without clear limits, approval, or review. Camilla looked directly at him. "Do you trust Sophie more than your own wife?" Charles paused. That silence wounded her more than an immediate answer. It revealed that the question could not be settled by affection alone. The king finally told her he trusted her with his life. But the crown could not be governed by marital trust. Sophie had been chosen because she stood outside the emotional bonds connecting husband, wife, father, and heir. The trusted confidant could intervene without defending a personal claim. Camilla opened a drawer and removed her copy of the emergency proposal. She handed it to Charles and said she would formally withdraw the request. Her staff would recognize Sophie's authority, but she demanded one promise. Never again would she discover a decision affecting her through a public proclamation. Charles folded the document once and set it aside. Then he moved his chair closer and took her hand. Before midnight, Sophie received written confirmation of Camilla's compliance. The crisis inside the palace had shifted, but outside those walls, Britain was preparing its own verdict. By morning, Sophie's face was on every front page in Britain. Some saw the appointment as a reward for quiet loyalty. Others called it evidence of a monarchy preparing for crisis. Outside Buckingham Palace, strangers gathered beneath the balcony, reading the proclamation from their phones and debating what the new title meant. Yet one newspaper image captured the public mood better than any headline. Sophie receiving the sealed document while the rest of the royal family stood frozen behind her. Broadcasters interrupted normal programming to explain the title. The Royal Guardian was a newly created position intended to protect royal continuity during moments of internal pressure. Commentators praised Sophie's steadiness, while constitutional experts argued over whether the role was only ceremonial or a real transfer of influence inside the palace. The uncertainty mattered, because Britain was not simply watching a promotion, it was watching the monarchy redesign its own safeguards. Buckingham Palace released a written statement confirming that Sophie would coordinate senior duties during periods of exceptional institutional pressure. The palace avoided every dangerous detail. It mentioned neither the conflicting orders nor Camilla's emergency proposal. Charles approved the wording, but the king knew the silence would invite deeper questions. Sophie watched the coverage beside Edward. The trusted confidant looked increasingly uncomfortable as presenters called her the monarchy's new power broker. He lowered the volume and told his wife that the public could see authority, while she could still feel only its weight. Sophie glanced at the sealed document and admitted that every headline made the responsibility seem larger. Camilla faced a harsher judgment. Newspapers studied the Queen Consort's expression during the proclamation and described it as the face of defeat. The coverage wounded her, yet she honored the promise made to Charles. Through an official written statement, she welcomed Sophie's appointment and declared that unity must come before private disappointment. The king read the message twice, understanding what the restraint had cost her. William confronted the question publicly. Reporters asked whether the new title weakened his position as heir. The prince answered that protecting the monarchy strengthened everyone who served it. His words stopped the appointment from being framed as a challenge to his future reign, but they did not end the mystery. Then the hidden timeline surfaced. A national broadcaster revealed through a documented palace schedule that an emergency dinner had taken place at Sandringham 3 nights before the proclamation. The private proposal remained secret, but the timing proved the title had emerged from sudden conflict. The Crown Chronicle captured the moment. Its front page showed Sophie holding the red-sealed document beneath the headline, "The woman Charles chose to hold the family together." Crowds outside Buckingham Palace raised copies as the midday broadcast repeated the words. Public opinion settled around her lack of ambition. Britain trusted Sophie because she had never appeared to seek power. Then the palace announced that Charles, Camilla, William, and Sophie would appear together at Westminster. Britain had accepted the Guardian. Now the family had to prove its unity was real. The Westminster service became more than a royal engagement. It was the first public test of a family nearly divided by competing authority. Charles arrived knowing his proclamation had wounded his wife. Camilla entered, knowing Sophie now possessed powers she had once sought for herself. William stood between loyalty to his father and responsibility for the future. And Sophie carried the title that had caused the crisis, determined to prove that guardianship was not about standing above the family, but holding it together. Sophie approved one unified ceremonial plan, and Charles personally confirmed every detail. A ceremonial plan was the official order controlling royal arrivals, seating, and public duties during a major event. The king would lead with Camilla beside him. William would follow as heir, while the trusted confidant would enter without seeking a place of special prominence. The arrangement respected each position and ended the competition that had pushed the household toward public embarrassment. Palace staff followed one verified schedule, one seating plan, and one chain of command. Royal continuity meant keeping the monarchy stable when leadership faced pressure or division. The confusion that once threatened to expose the family disappeared. Sophie had not removed the sovereign, weakened the queen consort, or challenged the future king. She had simply forced every branch of the household to obey the same confirmed authority. Camilla paused beside Sophie before they entered the abbey. The queen consort quietly thanked her for stopping the dispute before it became a public humiliation. She did not offer excuses. Sophie answered that the crown had been protected because everyone finally chose to follow the same truth. Charles heard the exchange and released a breath he had carried since the proclamation. The king understood that Sophie had succeeded without defeating his wife. She had created a boundary strong enough for trust to return without allowing affection to replace accountability. Charles later offered to expand the guardian's ceremonial privileges. Sophie declined. She told the monarch that the title must remain useful rather than glamorous. The moment it became another prize, its moral authority would disappear. William approached her after the service. The prince admitted that he had once feared the role might overlap with his responsibilities. Now he saw it differently. Sophie had not taken power from the heir. She had protected the monarchy he would one day inherit. Back at the palace, Sophie placed the original proclamation inside the red continuity box and turned the key. She handed it to Charles, but the king closed her fingers around it. He told her that the guardian had to remain independent, even from the man who created the office. That final gesture settled everything. Sophie had not become Britain's ruler. William had not been diminished. Camilla had not been permanently defeated. The proclamation had established a harder, clearer truth. The monarchy could no longer survive on private promises, competing households, or personal loyalty alone. Charles turned quiet service into formal responsibility. Camilla learned that closeness to the sovereign could not replace accountable authority. William discovered that protecting succession sometimes required sharing control. And Sophie proved that the strongest guardian was the person who accepted power reluctantly, used it fairly, and refused to make it personal. There was no further battle to fight. The proclamation had exposed the fracture, forced the family to confront it, and placed the crown's survival in the hands of duty rather than ambition. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.